Well, over 100 years, of course, there are a lot of hypotheses have proposed on why the Tsavo lions might have attacked all those railway workers. And one of the classics is prey shortage. Rinderpest is a cattle disease, a virus that was introduced to Africa from India. It ravaged cattle and other bovine stocks in East Africa, all the way to South Africa, where it's thought to have played a role in the collapse of the Zulu nation. Had huge effects on the history of East Africa, but by eliminating normal prey, predators will take matters into their own hands and redirect their efforts. Another idea was that man-eating culture might have existed among these lions. The railroad the British chose followed the shortest distances between water holes. Of course, these were steam locomotives and they needed water to run the rail. Well, that same route had been used for 1,000 years by caravans moving across Africa. Ivory traders off the Indian Ocean would come to East Africa. They wanted ivory. They'd head into the interior. They'd buy ivory and buy slaves to carry the ivory back to the coast. And slaves, of course, had terrible conditions. Many died along the way. And the thought was that a culture of man-eating might have developed in the wake of this terrible practice. Naivete is another idea that's been floated. And naivete is most of the railway workers the British employed had come from Pakistan and India, places without big, dangerous carnivores running around. So these guys simply pitched their tent in the woods rather than taking the sensible precautions that native Africans took of building thorn stockades around their housing and so on. Ritual of invitation is another implied cause for man-eating in the lions. Most of the workers were Hindu. Of course, the Hindus cremate their dead, but far from family and friends, in the bush of East Africa, when someone should pass away through diphtheria or cholera or some tropical disease, rather than being properly cremated, they put a coal from the fire in the mouth of one of these workers, and it was a ceremonial cremation rather than something that would effectively dispose of the body. So lions might have cleaned up after these abbreviated ceremonies. Finally, and perhaps most importantly for this audience, is the idea of infirmity. And a fellow named Jim Corbett, who was a famous animal control officer in colonial India, whenever a lion or a tiger would run amok in Indian villages, they'd call on Corbett, and some of these tigers ran up tolls of 600 people. Corbett would shoot the cat and almost invariably found that it had broken teeth, broken claws, wounded shotgun wounds in the shoulder, or some other malady that would inhibit the cat's ability to go after normal prey. And so in the Field Museum collection can't give us any more information about these things. These are all plausible, but one of the great things about specimens is specimens can be interrogated and asked questions in a way that the history books cannot. And these are the two man-eating lions that Colonel Patterson shot in 1898, in December of 1898. This picture was taken almost 20 years later outside his house in England. That's his wife sitting on top of them. This is almost 10 years before they came to Chicago, but we can see the two man-eaters, and we'll focus more on this skull because that skull is a very interesting one from our story's standpoint.